Hi, my name's Lewis Charnock and I'm the performance psychologist at Everton Football Club. At Everton, we are part of Aspiring the World Fellows, and today I'm going to share a presentation on optimising the recovery strategies adopted by the football club here at Everton. So, in terms of the presentation itself, it's divided into four parts. Firstly, I'll talk about our wider philosophy regarding recovery at Everton Football Club. Secondly, I'll speak about the processes and protocol attached to that, whether that's kind of physically, nutritionally, and psychologically. Thirdly, I will speak about our beliefs, our values, and perspectives on player development and how this relates to the recovery process of players and how we really strongly feel that we need to kind of aim towards replicating the demands of first team football. And hopefully this will help us produce more first team footballers. And finally, the last part of the presentation will be our conclusions of our current practice and then future considerations for ourselves and aspiring the fellows to consider in practice going forward. So in terms of our physical philosophy, I thought it was important to include this. Every sub-department of our performance department has a mission statement, and from a physical perspective, it's to deliver the best academy program that's evidence-based, research-informed and coaching-focused. The goals of that are to optimise athletic development, reduce the risk of injury and prepare players for the rigours of first team football. And again, as I mentioned on the previous slide, I'm going to speak about the last line particularly quite a lot in this presentation of how we always try and prepare our players for the rigours of first team football, whether that's from a physical or mental perspective. And then as a performance psychologist, we do have a mental philosophy adopted at the club. And again, this mission statement is the aim of it is to develop a winning mentality in every player. And hopefully this leads to sustained success for the academy. And the mental philosophy has a real kind of role to play in optimising the recovery process. And I'll speak about that a little bit later. So at Everton Football Club, we are lucky that we have a close relationship with a local university called Liverpool John Moores University, and we kind of work off the mantra of from the athlete to data and research and back again. How this looks in practice is that we get insights and data from the athlete, apply that to wider data or literature in the field, and then we apply that back to our practice and players. So it's from the athlete to data and research and back again, and this is how we kind of apply things, whether that's from a psychological perspective, coaching perspective or physical perspective when we're planning and delivering the programme. So in terms of the first practical application and the nuts and bolts of the optimising the recovery process, it all starts even before a coaching session or a game has taken place. At the club, we collect daily monitoring wellness checks. So this is a short questionnaire that's delivered to our players every morning via WhatsApp. And they need to complete that before they set foot in the training complex. And this looks at kind of physical, psychological freshness and muscle soreness biomarkers. This is self-report, so the players will complete this on their phone. It'll take them approximately 2 minutes, and this will kind of help us to get the ball rolling in terms of how they are feeling physically and mentally before they step foot into the training complex. Second part of that slide is human interaction. So as soon as the players arrive at Finch Farm, which is our training complex, we've got a real belief in terms of having conversations and human interactions. As performance teams and sports science teams in football, there's a lot of data collected and sometimes we forget to have a conversation with the players. So we've made a real shift in focus in terms of asking players how are they feeling today, how are they sore, where are they sore, is there anything that we need to know that's happened on or off the pitch last night or the day previous, in order to inform and optimise the recovery process for players and the group. So in terms of the programme and operationally, typically we have a 1-game week, and I'm talking from the professional development phase, so that's under 18s and 21s. And as you can see here, this is a typical week. that contain one competitive game. We use what's called a RAG guidance session to inform our coaches and our performance department to kind of design training sessions and the day. So we use red, amber and green days. So a red would be a real intense day from a physical and mental perspective. Amber would be kind of a moderate day, and green would be kind of a lighter day mentally and physically. So going through the week on a Monday, you can see it as an amber session. So that would be 2 days post game. This would be kind of a moderate intensity. Tuesday then would be typically our hardest day. It would be a red extensive session or intensive session. This would be kind of real place physical demands on the players and also from a mental perspective. In the middle of the week, they typically have a day off on a Wednesday, and then the 2 days leading into the game would be kind of lighter sessions and prep for the game. Saturday a game, and then immediate match day plus one would be a day off. So that would be kind of a real template that we run our program for a 1 game week. However, there are times where there's a 2 game week, and the fixtures would typically take place on a Tuesday and Saturday, and this kind of changes things slightly. However, we still use the red, amber and green sessions as guidance for coaches from the sports science and performance team. On a Monday, it would be kind of a lighter session and preparation for the game. Tuesday, the fixture. Wednesday on match day plus one would be kind of education or a day off. And then match day minus 2, the preparation for Saturday's game starts. That would be kind of a lighter intensity from a mental and physical perspective. Match day minus 1, because they've not trained, would be kind of a moderate intensity. And then the game on the Saturday and match day plus 1 would be typically a day off. We believe that this is kind of a template, and it could change, as I'll speak about later on in the presentation. But these are kind of how our schedule changes from a 1 game to a 2 game week in order to optimise the recovery process. So in terms of match day plus 1, this is when we are required to be in. So typically we try and give the players a day off. However, first team schedules, 21 schedules, sometimes the players are required to be in the day after a game. And what this day contains of is either a small group of players training, or alternatively players will go with the first team and facilitate their sessions. When they're not doing that, we try and keep recovery varied on this day. So there's 3 typical ways we do this. The players can either go for a walk, they can complete ice baths, or alternatively they could do a little bit of swimming to promote the recovery process. But sometimes the schedule of first team means that they do have to be in the building, so we do need to kind of promote recovery and optimise the recovery process in that. And as we're working with younger players as an academy, we do need to recognise that education is key. We feel that recovery is not just the players' responsibility, but it's also our responsibility as the academy staff. There's education staff who can play a part, canteen staff also who prepare meals, but then also parents and guardians who are looking after these young people. We feel that all these stakeholders need to be educated, and recovery is everyone's business. We don't just leave it down to the players and the players' responsibility to make sure that they're recovering sufficiently. We need to kind of spread the message of what good recovery looks like, because the players are only in the training complex for 3 to 4 hours a day. So that leaves around 18, 19, 20 hours that they're away from the training ground. So they can obviously promote the recovery in their time away from the training ground, and education plays a big part of that. We have a full-time nutritionist at the academy who kind of drives this education strand of the programme. So in terms of the nutrition strategy, on match day, immediately after the final whistle goes, there is a recovery drink waiting for them in the changing rooms. This contains approximately 60 grams carbohydrate and 30 grams protein, and the players will consume this immediately, probably after the coaches have their debrief and initial kind of thoughts. Then approximately 30 minutes post-match, a mixed meal to kind of take away containing carbohydrate and protein is provided. In previous years, we have had a kind of a sit-down meal, a formal meal with the opposition, but feedback from our players was that they wished to kind of quickly get off site and home. So we've worked with our canteen staff and our nutritionists to provide kind of a takeaway meal. Typically, this may be kind of a pasta pot or a sandwich wrap meal. And then, as I mentioned earlier, some days in the programme, sometimes there are days where the players are required to be in on match day +1. How that day looks is both from a kind of a physical and nutritional perspective. I'll go over this on this slide. So they'll report for breakfast and they will take fluids on board. They would then go into active recovery. This could be as simple as turning the legs over in the gym on a bike and consuming fluids with a hydrotab. They would then have a formal meal prepared for them by the canteen staff. This again contains kind of carbohydrate and protein. And then following that, they would go into recovery gym session and have a kind of a protein and carbohydrate drink provided for them immediately after that. So that's match day +1 from a nutritional perspective. In terms of the psychology strategy, a day after a game, and this is something that we're continuously evolving and looking at how we get better. I'm responsible for this, and how this looks typically is I will check the wellness and readiness to train in the morning. The players will kind of self-report physically and mentally how they are feeling, and typically sometimes you may see patterns in terms of their motivation being lower after they've just had a game, or their calmness isn't as desirable as it could be. This might be because they're worrying about their past performance, or they're excited of how they played the day previous. I will then make sure that we're around for breakfast and have player conversations. How are they feeling? We'll ask coaches to check in with players, but then also me as a psychologist, I'll ask the players how are they feeling mentally. And then what we try and do is wherever we can, we try and give the players some autonomy and choice in terms of, do they go in the ice baths? Do they go in the pool, or can they as a group go for a walk to a coffee shop? So we try and kind of give players some kind of power and choice in that. And then there's also an option for individual players to complete any follow-up actions that may be kind of follow-up actions with the performance analyst to look at clips from the game. It might be a debrief with myself from a psychological perspective, or alternatively their coach. So this is the psychology strategy adopted by the club, match day +1, that we feel kind of optimises that recovery for the group and individual players. So in terms of conclusions and future considerations, it all comes back to our philosophy. We actually aim to train in a fatigue state for a good reason, and there is a recognition that players may not be training or playing fully recovered, but we believe this is beneficial as it aids, in our view, the transition to senior football, and hopefully this leads to us producing more players for the first team. Secondly, the professional development phase, which is kind of the players that's been mentioned in this presentation, it's really difficult because particularly the more promising players or the high potential players in these groups will be asked to kind of take part in multiple squads. Some days they will be following the under-18s training session, then the next day they might be training with the first team, and then the day after they might be playing for the 21s. This demands kind of a real high physical and mental output on individual players, and we kind of need to tailor their individual kind of recovery process and not have a kind of a one-size-fits-all in terms of the recovery process. A third point to kind of conclude and consider is that we try and control certain aspects, and that may be, as I said, the design of the week, whether it's a 1-game week or a 2-game week. However, sometimes football is chaos and it changes because of the first team schedule. So we've always got to make sure that we're prepared as a staff, that certain individual players may be required at first team or under 21s level, and we need to adapt to that. Then in terms of future considerations and how we can kind of make sure our practice is enhanced, and this is to throw it out to the aspiring the world fellows as well as ourselves, is that mental recovery is probably the biggest area that we can probably gain from looking into a little bit more from research and literature. Firstly, what we'd suggest is conducting kind of research and practice around asking players how do they best heal over from competition and training. We think we've got a good idea in terms of designing the week and giving them activities such as a day off or in the pool or an ice bath or just as simple as turning as going on the bikes. However, we rarely get the player's perspective from this. And the second point ties into that. We feel that current strategies are good, but from a mental perspective, there's very little data in the field in terms of does that facilitate or debilitate the recovery process from the player's perspective? How are they feeling? How do they feel then when they're asked to go in the pool? Would they rather just a day off? And finally, a big one from me, and we're doing this a little bit better at Everton Football Club more recently, is that can we trust players more to use days off wisely? It all comes back to that education piece in terms of what good recovery looks like from a physical, nutrition and psychological perspective. But can we as clubs be more prepared to be more player-led and trust them to do the right thing? So thanks for listening. It's been the presentation for optimising the recovery strategy from Everton Football Club. And again, we're always grateful to be part of the Aspiring the World Fellows community. Thank you.